last check. Just so you know, there's about 23,000 people registered for this webinar, so no pressure on us, but I'm super excited that we're going to be presenting the social trends for 2020. We've been waiting a long time for this, all year. We'll be live tweeting during today's webinar, so please follow along and join the conversation using the hashtag SocialTrends2020. You can tweet directly from within the webinar console using the Twitter widget that you can see, and please direct your tweet to the handle @HootBusiness. Some quick housekeeping items just to share before we start. This webinar is being streamed live, so please close any bandwidth-heavy apps to reduce chances of buffering. We all love that spinning wheel, of course. Our full Social Trends 2020 report is available in the resource library. Also, tweet us your questions or comments with the hashtag SocialTrends2020. And also, we'll be having a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar, so please make sure to leave your questions for us in the Q&A widget. Okay. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. I'll first kick it off with introducing myself. My name is Ryan Ginsberg. I'm the Global Director of Paid Social at Hootsuite. I lead the enterprise strategy for ads at Hootsuite, and I work with many of our strategic customers to help them drive business results through social. More importantly, I'm most excited to introduce our featured speaker who will be walking you through all of our trends today. Her name is Sarah Dolly. She's the Senior Copywriter at Hootsuite. A little bit about Sarah. Sarah led the research and analysis and the creation of our entire Global Trends report. She's over 14 years of experience in strategy and copywriting, and was most recently the social media manager at some of Canada's largest television stations, where I actually worked with Sarah over at the Much Music and MTV side of things. She works with Hootsuite's brand team to define and articulate how social media is impacting brands, marketers, and consumers. You can find her on Twitter at Sarah Dolly. Okay, now, before we dive into it, I'd like to start by giving you all a sense of how we actually came up with these social trends. So first, it begins with our annual trend survey, and we surveyed over 3,100 respondents this year. This gives us a really great and unique data and insights that no other report will have. Then we do an absolute ton of interviews with both internal and external experts, and then the primary research is analyzed alongside reports and stats from the likes of Edelman, Gartner, Deloitte, Global Web Index, and a lot more. And the reason we do this really in-depth research is that we don't simply want to curate a list of shiny new features or flash-in-the-pan tactics. We're focused on the larger macro trends that are shaping consumer behavior and social strategy. So while we definitely keep tabs on all the rapid change within social media, we also focus just on what isn't changing to make these trends fundamental areas that you can actually take action on over the course of 2020 and beyond. Okay, so here they are. These are your top 5 trends for today. You can check out our report in even more detail and recommendations, and you can find the report in the resource library in your console. Okay. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to start with the very first trend. Over to you, Sarah.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. So excited to be taking you through these trends, and I'm going to just dive right into our first trend of the day, and that is the balance between public and private engagement. So I'd actually like to start with a poll to see how many of you are using private social channels like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp for your business. So you can go ahead and make your selection on the screen and then just hit submit. And the reason that I'm asking this is because we continued hearing a lot about privacy this year. So almost every major social network has been taking steps recently to offer more private and intimate experiences on social. For example, Instagram launched their close friends feature on stories. They also launched Threads, which is a camera-first messaging app, allowing users to connect with close friends in really a more dedicated and private space. LinkedIn also began rolling out their new Teammates feature, which helps users see updates and content from people that they actually work with in real life. And all these changes are really reshaping how social marketers do business. So over half of the respondents in our 2020 Trends survey said that the shift to private social is making them rethink their content strategies. And it looks like our poll is actually pretty split. So almost 60% of you are taking advantage of private social channels, as you should be. They are really important for connecting with your customers one-on-one. But if Mark Zuckerberg is right, should the rest of you be pivoting your strategies towards this one-to-one communication in private social channels? That's the question. And we definitely don't think you should be pivoting entirely towards private channels. Public content discovery and consumption really remains a core use case for social media. So we found that 52% of brand discovery online is still happening in public social feeds. And obviously, to grow as a business, you have to go beyond your loyal followers and reach new audiences. And that's really where public feeds come in. Public feeds are also still a really critical place for social listening. So gathering insights about your audience based on what they're publicly sharing across social, you simply can't do that in private spaces. So the trend that we're seeing is that successful brands are developing social strategies that encompass both public feeds and private spaces, but using them in really distinct and purposeful ways. So they're using public feeds to increase reach and awareness, and then they're using private channels to build deeper relationships and really to offer specific value. So an example of a brand doing this is Citadel. They're a leading hedge fund, and they wanted to position themselves as a top employer and increase entry-level applications. So to do so, they created a tournament called the Data Open, and they used public social feeds to raise awareness about the tournament, to generate buzz. They promoted school-specific social updates, encouraging students to form teams. But then on private channels, they really helped students connect with one another one-on-one and get career advice through an invite-only Facebook group called Office Hours. They also built a Facebook chatbot in Messenger, and they challenged students to a series of complex math problems. So students who could beat the bot got their resumes sent to the front of the line for consideration. And I really like this because it's an example of how to use private channels for more than simple customer support. And the result of this blended approach for Citadel was great. Their applications for entry-level positions increased by 74%, and they saw a 200% higher click-through rate compared to previous paid advertising efforts around the tournament. So how can you put this trend into practice in 2020? One is making the experience a customer has with your brand as consistent and seamless as possible across public and private channels. So people are really used to switching back and forth between the two throughout the day, and you want to make it easy for them to do that with your business as well. And a new feature released this year that I think can help with that are called Click to Messenger ads. So these are ads on Facebook and Instagram that appear in public feeds, but they send users directly into a private conversation with your business on Messenger or WhatsApp, taking them from public to private in a really seamless way. Second, automate the easy stuff. So responding to every single individual message that your business receives on private channels is going to be hard to scale for any business. Bots are super helpful. They can handle the easy stuff, so the questions that come up time and time again, but really you need to make sure that you still have real human beings handling the more complex conversations. Third, maybe most importantly, you need to respect the function and nuances of private channels. So think about how you use messaging apps yourself. You're talking to family, you're sharing a funny video with your mom, you're making plans to meet up with friends, and then boom, this brand pops into that world trying to sell you something. If you're going to be engaging with somebody one-to-one in these private personal spaces, the utility of your content is super important. So you really have to make sure that you're offering value. People are gravitating towards private channels to escape these noisy and impersonal social networks. So don't chase them there with the exact same strategies that drove them there in the first place. So trend number 2. This is all about the new role that employers have in our increasingly divided world. So from impeachment hearings and divisive politics to the long shadow of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, optimism is not exactly the predominant theme on social media these days, to put it lightly. And according to the Edelman Trust Barometer, only 1 in 5 people actually believe the system is working for them. And the majority of the mass population actually doesn't feel that they're going to be better off in 5 years. So simply put, people are feeling pretty pessimistic these days, and they don't have a lot of confidence in societal institutions anymore. But Edelman also uncovered something really interesting this year, and that's the fact that despite faith falling in these traditional institutions, people are very much willing to trust the organizations that they work for. So 75% of people said that they trust their employers. And that number was higher than any other institution, higher than media, higher than government, higher than business in general. But make no mistake, this trust is not unconditional. Employees really expect their organizations these days to be their partners in change. They don't want to work for a company who's only focusing on making better things. They really expect them to make things better. And we're really seeing businesses shift their priorities in response to this pressure. In 2019, the Business Roundtable, which is a group of nearly 200 top CEOs, they announced that they were no longer going to focus solely on shareholders, but focusing more on generating value for customers, for employees, the communities that they operate in, and society as a whole. And this shift can really pay off. So according to Deloitte, purpose-driven companies earn higher market share gains, and they grow 3 times faster than other organizations. And a commitment to purpose also creates this internal trust that we're talking about. And internal trust leads to higher retention rates and engaged employees who are more likely to advocate on their organization's behalf and then inspire trust among consumers. So we predict that in 2020, progressive organizations are going to take this new responsibility really seriously, and they're going to focus on building strong internal cultures and earning the trust of employees. They're then going to use their trusting employee advocates to amplify their purpose on social media and really put to work that inextricable link between the employee and the customer experience. So a great example of this in action is Patagonia. One employee recently took to LinkedIn to share her gratitude for the company's parental policies, on-site childcare, and they really advocated for other companies to follow suit. And it's generated a huge response on LinkedIn, over 87,000 reactions. It's a really clear example of why Patagonia actually has a 100% retention rate for employees coming back from maternity leave. And it's also a clear example of how genuine internal voices really become critical these days for building external trust in a company. So Patagonia's consistent commitment to their ethics from the inside out has really helped the company quadruple its revenue over the past decade. But before you go taking a bold stance on social media, you really need to make sure that your organization is living up to its claims. So simply put, you have to do it before you talk about it. Social media, as we all know, is a particularly unforgiving forum when it comes to brands using societal issues as a marketing ploy. They see through it really quickly. We all saw the backlash that Pepsi faced with their Kendall Jenner commercial a few years ago. What your organization says really has to match what it does. And really that all starts at the top. So according to Edelman, 71% of employees believe it's critically important for their CEO and leadership teams specifically to speak up and respond to challenging times. And social media is a really effective place for business leaders to embody the values of their organization and to speak up when necessary. Of course, taking a stance on social media might anger some people as much as it drives loyalty and praise from others. So having a brand protection plan in place is really important, even if your organization chooses to remain neutral on these hot button issues. You're going to want to protect your reputation. So just because you don't proactively start a certain conversation doesn't mean your brand isn't going to be dragged into it in a way that you aren't expecting. And lastly, you need to make employee advocacy an actual business priority. So we heard from over half of the respondents in our trends survey this year that their top challenge with employee advocacy is simply finding the time to source content and run the program. So to live up to its potential, employee advocacy needs to be prioritized as a corporate strategy and really embraced by the entire organization. It can't just be a side of desk task for social marketers. Lord knows you all have enough on your plate already. So on to our next trend. Of course, we couldn't let 2019 go by without talking about TikTok. So for those of you who haven't downloaded TikTok or been obsessively researching social trends for 4 months like myself, here's a brief overview of the TikTok phenomenon. It's an app formerly known as Musical.ly. It's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company valued at $75 billion. And TikTok is really the first social platform from China to be making significant inroads in the US, which is really interesting. And it's all about short form video. So it's somewhat reminiscent of Vine, if you've ever seen Vine before, but more focused on music. So there's a lot of lip syncing, a lot of dance challenges. But I think the most interesting thing about TikTok is the sophisticated AI technology behind it. So TikTok uses machine learning to track the smallest details of what you click on, what you read, how long you watch a video for. And really within a matter of minutes, it seems to know what you're going to be interested in sort of more than you do. And people love it. So TikTok now has over 800 million monthly active users. It's been one of the most downloaded apps all year. And even though these numbers are pretty impressive, I think it's important to remember that the demographics on TikTok are still quite narrow. So a whopping 69% of TikTok users are Gen Z. So they're between the ages of 16 and 24 years old. And 500 million of those monthly active users actually reside in China. So the question is, will the TikTok hype last? And should your brand be jumping on it? Generally speaking, no. I don't think you should be jumping on the TikTok bandwagon just yet. And the first reason I say that is simply the demographics. So unless Gen Z is your target demographic, you won't be reaching a really relevant audience on TikTok as it stands right now. Of course, that can change in the future, but for now, your time and money are better invested in social content on more established platforms. The second reason is that its growth may be slowing down. So The Verge recently reported that TikTok just experienced its first ever decline in downloads on a quarterly basis. And more importantly, it's really going to have to deal with the major social networks now swooping in, trying to replicate its features. So I'm talking specifically about Instagram here. Instagram was really successful incorporating stories into their platform, which was one of the defining features of Snapchat. And they've now set their sights on TikTok with the release of a new feature called Reels. And this isn't the first time that they've tried stealing the spotlight away from TikTok, actually. Facebook launched a TikTok clone called Lasso at the end of 2018. Hasn't gotten much traction yet. Reels, however, I think could have a brighter future. It allows Instagram users to set 15-second video clips to music, just like TikTok, and share them as stories. So I think replicating TikTok's features directly within Instagram makes way more sense than putting out another standalone app, because they can already capitalize on their existing user base, and brands using it as well don't have to start from scratch in building their following. Reels is only available in Brazil for now, but we'll see how this continues rolling out in 2020. And even though the future of TikTok is uncertain, ignoring it completely would also be a mistake. So with Gen Z still fully in the driver's seat, TikTok can be a really valuable source of insights that social marketers can use to adapt their strategies for the next generation on social. For example, TikTok displays a pretty obvious shift in aesthetics when it comes to social content. So TikTok's popularity is built on real people doing fun, creative things, not this glossy, carefully staged influencer aesthetic that has really come to dominate other social networks. And it's not just Gen Z leading this change either. If you look at the popularity of more informal formats like Instagram stories, it really revolves around fun and authentic social content. So as marketers, it's going to be really important to keep tabs on these aesthetic preferences in order to keep your content as relevant and as engaging as possible. There are some great examples of brands using TikTok. Nike in particular, they knew that young women in Italy were facing a lot of challenges and stereotypes that prevented them from participating in sports. And so to reach this demographic, they looked at TikTok, and they saw that thousands of young women were challenging one another to perform these really intricate dance routines demonstrating a lot of impressive physical ability. And as they put it, we realized we had been looking at sport through Nike's lens and not what it meant to our audience. So they recruited 3 popular TikTokers in Milan, and they paired them with elite athletes who introduced the young women to boxing, basketball, soccer, and the athletes and the influencers then worked together to co-create dance routines based on these sports. And then they challenged other young women on TikTok to do the choreography as a hashtag dance challenge. The campaign earned over 100 million views. It generated more than 46,000 video responses and user-generated routines in response. But more impressively, this campaign actually drove a rise in Nike Plus memberships in the region and helped to shrink the gender gap. So, even if you're not going to jump on TikTok in 2020, you should be keeping your eye on it. So for most brands, we recommend using TikTok as a source of competitor and customer intelligence for now. Monitor the trends that bubble up, adapt the ideas that make sense for your brand into your other social content. Basically look at ways of bringing some of that fun, innovative energy of TikTok back into your social profiles on more established platforms. And look to use new video formats. So video is still the top performing content format on social media. And in 2020, I don't think there's any better place for brands to experiment with fun and authentic video than on Instagram stories. You can reach a larger, more diverse audience than you can on TikTok, but that desire for raw, fun, unpolished content is just as high. LinkedIn, though, also is rolling out their new live video feature, and you can use that to deliver more authentic video and content to a more relevant audience if it's a better fit for your brand. Lastly, I think the rise of TikTok points to this continuing diversification in social platforms. So these really offer more opportunities to engage with people in more specialized contexts and in these niche communities. So think about diversifying your audience targeting beyond the major social platforms. For example, Snapchat, Pinterest, and Reddit have all seen some really amazing year-over-year growth in monthly active users. LinkedIn doesn't report on that specific metric, but an interesting stat that we uncovered this year is that 18 to 24-year-olds are actually the fastest growing demographic on LinkedIn right now, meaning you don't necessarily have to jump on TikTok to reach younger demographics. So I think this is a great time to do another poll, because I'd love to know which social platforms besides the big 3, meaning Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, your organizations are finding to be the most effective this year. So you can actually choose more than one option here. And while you do that, Ryan, I would really love to hear your thoughts on these other social networks, especially when it comes to advertising. What have you been seeing? What are our customers thinking for 2020?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So I'll certainly talk about, moving away from the big 3, but just to put things into perspective, sort of the big 2. So 2020, we're all sure to see Facebook and Instagram really continue to drive the lion's share of social media ad spend. I think we can probably all agree that that's what we're going to see. And to Sarah's point earlier, I think from the big 2, I would say Instagram Stories is probably going to be the big winner there. In particular, they're going to drive probably the highest proportion of change in spend in 2020. However, we're starting to see some pretty big shifts as advertisers look to sort of diversify their media strategy. And I think this is where we're going to start to, it's going to be a lot more prevalent in 2020, particularly all the changes that are happening at Facebook. And when I talk about changes, Sarah, you mentioned this earlier around privacy, what have you. One of the things that Facebook is doing a lot right now is putting restrictions from an audience targeting standpoint. So for example, most recently, Facebook put restrictions on housing, employment, and credit advertisers in the U.S. And really, they put these restrictions really to prevent advertisers from running discriminatory ad campaigns. And in all fairness, I think it's the right corporately responsible thing to do for Facebook, but undoubtedly, it's going to naturally shift ad spend to other platforms. So what other platform do we think is going to win in 2020? If I had to hedge my bets, I'm going to bet on LinkedIn in 2020, outside of the big 3, of course. Certainly, we're going to see this on the B2B side. I think there's no question that LinkedIn is a really great fit for B2B, but I also see LinkedIn becoming a more viable solution for B2C brands, particularly ones that are trying to reach more affluent consumers. seeing a lot of success on this. And from an audience targeting perspective, like I mentioned earlier, so while Facebook is putting restrictions here, I think LinkedIn's targeting capabilities actually uniquely set them apart from every other social network. So the one thing I'll say about LinkedIn, in order to make a measurable shift at scale in terms of the amount of advertising that's happening on LinkedIn, really I think LinkedIn needs to drive their ads costs down. And really to make this happen, they need two things. They need to increase their reach and they need higher content consumption, because it's these two factors that ultimately increase the available ad inventory, and the more ad inventory you have, the more your costs go down. That's just how it works. But I can tell you what's interesting is that we're really already starting to see this now at a pretty big scale. So LinkedIn, from what I'm seeing, is very, very much focusing on driving content consumption. It's really, for them, it's all about driving people into the news feed. And it's working. I think the last metrics I saw something around 50%. Feed engagement was up about 50% this year. And so this is going to bode really well for advertisers in 2020. So very curious to see how that's going to play out for LinkedIn next year. The other, I'm quoting, like you can see me, the other platform I'll call out here that I think we're going to see some gains is Pinterest. And this is really tying into the rise of social commerce. And we've talked about this before with lots of my customers, is that social commerce is certainly a big thing. And I feel that Pinterest has an audience that's really engaged with sort of the idea of buying products they see on the platform. And advertisers are, particularly retail brands, actually. So I think there was a recent report that shows that on ad spend from Pinterest than any other form of than any other platform, social media platform. So certainly, I think Pinterest is another key platform to keep their eye on. And finally, I guess since you brought up in terms of TikTok and Snapchat for this matter, the verdict is still out, but I'm sort of aligning with what Sarah was talking about. I honestly, at this point, I don't see TikTok in particular driving any measurable gains or significant change to the social advertising landscape in 2020, but the verdict is still out on that. So that's my predictions for where we're going to take social ads in 2020.
Great, thank you. So poll results are in. No surprise here. LinkedIn, massive lead on the other networks. But as Ryan mentioned, explore these other ones, explore Pinterest. There are some really great opportunities there for, I think, any organization in 2020. So on to our fourth trend. This is about the convergence of social marketing and performance marketing. So as social marketers, I'm sure you've all seen and felt your role evolve as the industry matures. We've been having to adapt as likes disappear across Instagram and Facebook, organic reach continues to decline, and advertising is really becoming the entry point for most brands on social media. And of course, expectations higher than ever to deliver concrete results. So with all these changes, we've seen an increase in performance marketing, which we're defining as using social ads to achieve a very specific and direct short-term conversion, such as a sale, a lead, or a click. In fact, 44% of senior marketers in our trend survey said that driving conversions like these are a top goal for them in 2020. And it's not surprising. Performance marketing is easy to optimize for these types of short-term conversions, and it really delivers that concrete ROI that executives want from social media. But we know that it takes more than short-term tactical wins for any business to survive. So performance marketing tactics, they generate temporary lifts in sales and revenue, but it's brand building that really creates the type of differentiation and customer loyalty that drives true long-term growth over time. And businesses, make no mistake, they need both to succeed. And our report really goes into more detail about how this balance is reshaping not just social marketing teams, but marketing in general and the role of the CMO. For now, though, we're going to focus on how it's reshaping social marketing teams. So typically it's been specialists like paid media teams or outside agencies that are the ones handling performance marketing on social media. And while social marketers handle the day-to-day community management and brand campaigns, it's really becoming easier for anyone to create and optimize ads. So now we're seeing a lot of brands centralizing these efforts in-house in order to have a more holistic approach to social media. So they're combining paid and organic with other channels within one team. And this means that social marketers really have to do it all. To manage the day-to-day interactions while planning long-term creative strategy, all while optimizing ads on the fly and working with data analyst teams to understand the impact of social. So in 2020, we believe that advanced organizations are going to specifically train their teams to build out these hybrid skill sets. They're going to focus on balancing short-term conversions with the ability to drive long-term strategies that build the brand over time. So our customers, Michael Graham is actually a good example of this. They're a group of specialist real estate agents in England, and they wanted to better convey their brand identity while also increasing click-throughs and business inquiries made on their website. So they had clear brand and performance goals. And they had been using an outside agency for basic social media maintenance, but they quickly realized that they were going to have to unify their strategy in-house in order to consistently achieve these objectives. So they assembled an internal social team who could manage everything, and they united organic and paid social across one platform so that everyone could better analyze their ad performance and data from Google Ads alongside their organic and brand building activity. And this really enabled the team to manage and optimize advertising campaigns while making sure that all of their content was aligned with the same unified message to really drive that long-term brand equity that we're talking about. And as a result, social media has now grown into Michael Graham's biggest communications channel. So most of the budget that they were spending on print advertising is now getting redirected to social and digital marketing. So definitely in 2020, focus on sharpening both your brand building and your performance skills this year. And also we recommend focusing on building full funnel social ad campaigns. So this is really about using smart retargeting to move customers along the purchase path from simple brand awareness to direct conversions, instead of trying to do too much with one ad. Second, look to unite social and search. So your long-term brand awareness efforts on social are going to go to waste if you're just sending your audience straight to the competition on Google. So you really need a strategic approach to both brand and performance marketing across both of these channels and make sure that they're working to complement one another. Third, give your brand campaigns time to perform. So social marketers have this tendency to see the vast amounts of data and really quickly change up their approach and tactics week by week, day by day, even hour by hour. But as we discussed, the impact of brand building happens over the long term. This is why one of the core tenets of effective advertising is repeating your key message over an extended period of time. It's massively beneficial for improving recall, engagement, and awareness. So you really need to give your campaigns time to resonate with your audience. So Ryan, I know that you talk to our customers a lot on a regular basis about that, and the idea of brand versus performance is a bit of a hot topic. So what are your thoughts on this?
Actually, it's more than a bit of a hot topic. It's a steamy hot topic. I'm super bullish on this trend. It seems like I talk about this almost every day with not only our customers, but internally as well. So I'll tell you what I'm hearing. So most definitely I'm seeing the role of the social marketer really being challenged. And what I mean by challenged, they're being challenged by their senior level employees internally within their own organization. And the challenge is that they're challenging them to drive more meaningful and measurable business results. Their whole job is being challenged for that matter. And for most social teams I talk to, and this sort of aligns with what you were talking about, but in terms of how I see it play out. So for most social teams, brand awareness is their core KPI. And anybody listening probably can resonate with this and relate to this. And when I talk about brand awareness, I'm specifically meaning reach, impressions, social metrics, that kind of thing. So, and truthfully, these metrics are obviously critical for businesses. There's a ton of other channels available to marketers to drive awareness. What's great about social is that it's inherently actionable. And because of this, I'm seeing changes in overall KPIs for social teams. And that's really moving beyond brand metrics and a shift towards what I call mid-funnel goals, or as Sarah rightly called it out, sort of a shift from brand goals to performance goals. And when we talk about performance goals, what I'm seeing most in the industry, what this actually means is really focusing on two things: driving leads and driving traffic to their website. This is nothing new. It's just now it's really about the social teams being tasked with these type of goals. And leads and traffic, not surprisingly, are unquestionably just more meaningful to senior level management because it's just much easier to correlate directly to sales and other bottom funnel business outcomes. Although I will say, I think it's important to point out, at least what I'm hearing in the market, and you kind of touched on the word conversions, and I think sometimes people get a little confused with what that means. Conversions doesn't always have to mean bottom of the funnel KPIs. It doesn't always have to mean direct sales. And I mention this because there's lots of people thinking, well, I don't have an e-com store, there's no performance-focused component to my business. Even if you're focusing on leads and traffic, that's still in the world of performance. And the key here, and sort of the real win for social teams, and the uniqueness, is that brand building and performance campaigns go hand in hand, or at least they should. And as Sarah's mentioned, it's all about driving down the funnel. And social teams are really primed to lead the charge here, as they often have the best and most informed insights on their customers. In fact, more than most people within the entire organization. So truthfully, I think of all the trends we've gone through and all the trends of today, I'm most excited about this one, speaking personally, because I think this shift is really going to raise the bar of how social can drive business results for organizations. And, you know, as I say that, I'm listening to myself, and while that statement is a bit of a cliche, ultimately I think it's what's needed to ensure businesses pay even more attention to the real power of social and the power of the medium. So that's my take on it.
Totally. Cliches are often rooted in truth. So I do think this is how we're finally going to move social away from being viewed as this standalone tactic in its own little world and really turn it into more of an integral part of the overall marketing mix. Okay, our last trend. This is about measurement and ROI and the social proof gap closing. So we've certainly seen a lot of improvements when it comes to measuring the impact of social media, both in terms of technology and the type of data available to social marketers. So why is ROI and measurement still such a challenge for so many organizations? Partly because technology is outpacing skills in many organizations. So a lot of social marketers aren't even taking basic steps towards measuring the real business value that social is bringing to their organization. For example, 70% of respondents in our trend survey this year said that they aren't using an attribution model at all. And that's going to make it really hard to prove the value of social compared to other channels who have their measurement down pat. And there is no universally perfect method. I want to be clear about that. Measuring success, really, it's a challenge across all areas of marketing. This isn't a problem that's unique to social, but you have to start somewhere. And our analysis found that leading marketers are closing this social proof gap, and they're creating a clear path for others to follow. In our survey, we found that organizations who reported being confident in measuring social ROI, they have 3 key traits in common. The first trait is that they're more likely to unite social data with other data for a holistic view of their customer. So we found that marketers who are only collecting data from native platforms like Instagram or Facebook are the least confident when it comes to ROI. And really that's because they're just measuring social activity in that silo. The highest level of confidence, however, belongs to those organizations that are working on this holistic view of the customer, and they're bringing in data from web, from digital analytics, from CRM systems, and they're analyzing it as a complete set. So the next trait is focusing on omni-channel integration, which is really just a big word for ensuring that what you're doing on social is aligned with the things that you're doing on other digital and traditional channels. So that sounds simple, but not everyone is doing it. It goes for having an integrated social advertising strategy as well, not just your customer engagement strategies. So high-performing organizations are really making sure that their social ad campaigns are connected into email programs, PR activities, into advocacy programs. Social is a key part of the planning and execution, and it's not measured or executed in isolation. So the third trait is that they don't reinvent the wheel when it comes to attribution. They're using models that have been tried and tested in other channels like SEO, in television and outdoor advertising, and they're using these models, applying them to their actions on social. So we specifically heard that high-performing organizations are having the most success with multi-touch attribution and market mix modeling, whereas in contrast, those who are really struggling to measure ROI are the ones, the 70% that aren't using an attribution model at all. And attribution is a really complex topic. We have a dedicated team of data analysts at Hootsuite, and to be honest, even we don't have it fully figured out yet. But the point is, you have to start somewhere. And piggybacking off what other channels are doing is a really great place to begin. So here's an example of social attribution at work. Third Love, they're a women's underwear brand. They made a simple change in attribution models, and they discovered that their Facebook ads were getting significantly undercredited compared to other channels. They were historically only tracking sales that came via direct clicks on their ads, but they began including what's called view-through attribution as well. And they did this within Facebook, and it allowed them to track when someone who only viewed their Facebook ad then purchased the product. So Third Love realized that they were actually seeing a 2 times lower cost per acquisition with Facebook ads and a 4 times lower cost per acquisition with their messenger ads. So along with those 3 traits that we just covered, how else can you close the social proof gap in 2020? 1, standardize your UTM codes. I feel like we need to tattoo this on the wall of every building. It's a simple thing that can really go a long way. A consistent UTM framework allows you to analyze which specific pieces of social content are helping achieve your business objectives. It's something that Hootsuite can easily help you do as well. Second, don't get lost in attribution. So we talked a lot about it, but it's just one of the ways that you can measure the success of your efforts on social. There might be other methods, there might be other metrics that work better for your organization, and we could really do an entire webinar on this topic alone. For now, download our full trends report. It goes into some more detail, and you can find other resources in there as well. Third, invest in both skills and tools. So one of my favorite quotes from the interviews this year came from Kushal, who's the manager of enterprise analytics at Hootsuite. And he said, just because you bought a calculator doesn't make you good at math. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Tools alone aren't going to help you. They're not going to solve all your problems. You really need to have dedicated capacity, whether that's in your company or in a partner, to integrate and analyze and really make sense of all the data and figure out what's most meaningful and relevant for your business. Ryan, this is another very hot topic and another big challenge for a lot of organizations. So how have you been seeing our customers putting these things into practice, and what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's definitely a very hot topic. I'm sure everybody on the line right now can relate to everything you've just been saying. And truthfully, I couldn't agree more to your last point. And this is something I hear all the time. Really, you invest in a tool designed to measure ROI, and you still can't figure it out. Measuring attribution really, as you mentioned, takes more than just software to get it right. So yeah, this is obviously a hot topic with our customers. And truthfully, while it's a trend, I see this being a trend in 2020 and beyond. I'm not saying that I don't think we're all going to figure this out in a year's time. And that's simply because, as you said it, most businesses haven't fully figured it out. They're not even necessarily sure what they need to do to figure it out. So here's what I can tell you from my standpoint. And this is sort of the conversation I have with a lot of our customers. So first off, and some of this you've stated before, when you're starting off, my recommendation is to keep it simple, even if it's not perfect. So let me give you some examples. So in terms of the types of attribution that are available, again, keep it simple. Last touch attribution, while it's certainly not the best and most accurate, it's by far the easiest to implement. Last touch, for those of you who aren't aware, it's ultimately it being the last click before the final conversion, regardless of what that final conversion is. But remember, and this is important, if you're using last touch, when measured up against platforms like search, for example, social will typically not get the credit it deserves. So take this data with a grain of salt. But what it will do is encourage you to get the right tracking in place. So, Sarah, you mentioned tattoo on the wall, UTMs. I couldn't agree more. It's really about getting in the habit of applying these to every campaign, not only UTMs, but obviously your pixels as well. So that's paramount. That's the first component from an attribution perspective. Secondly, you can look at other models. So, first touch attribution is another great one. It's certainly going to favor social much more, but it's not always the easiest to connect back to the final conversion. And then lastly is multi-touch. And this is by far the holy grail of the attribution world, but it's also the most challenging. And I say this because don't worry if you're not there yet. Pick one, stick to it, start simple, and then work your way up as you go. And the last thing I'll say about this before I pass it back to you, Sarah, is again, take attribution models with a grain of salt. Also, if you're not sure if what you're doing is working or if it's right, look at your customer funnel. You know exactly what you put into market, and think anecdotally if it makes sense to you, if you're putting all of the weight on the last click or what have you. So just move away from the data for a minute and make yourself an average user and think of everything you've done actually makes sense and how it relates back to the data that you have available to yourself. So that's my recommendation and my suggestions in terms of how we see attribution playing out in the next year or so ahead.
Totally. I would also add that starting simple, working your way up is great. Also, switch it up. If you feel like something's not right, if you feel like you're not getting what you need from that data, look at the Third Love example. Try a different approach, right? Because these aren't set in stone yet. There is no perfect method. You don't have to marry one attribution model and then stick with it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So that wraps up our trends for the year. To recap, we talked about the balance between public and private engagement. We talked about the new importance of internal trust, the TikTok effect on social content and culture, the convergence of brand and performance marketing, and finally, closing that social proof gap. As mentioned earlier, the full Social Trends 2020 report goes into a lot more detail about each trend. You can find additional examples, more data, and it's available to you right now. I'll hand it over to Ryan for our Q&A session. I will note that if we don't have time to get to all of your questions, I would definitely be happy to try and answer as many as I can on Twitter later. Now that I'm not writing the report anymore, I've got some free time. So you can send your questions my way either via the Hoop Business handle or personally at Sarah Dolly. So over to you, Ryan, for some Q&A.
Perfect. So first, your questions are coming in a drove, so thank you everyone who has submitted questions already. If you haven't submitted one, you can easily just leave your question directly in the Q&A widget. So let's dive into it. We have about 10 or 12 minutes left in the hour that we booked for this webinar. So I will kick this off, and Sarah, you and I can take these as we go. The first question I'm going to pick, and again, there's a lot. So again, if we didn't get to yours, stay tuned. What skills should social marketers be building in 2020? Sarah, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So as we mentioned in the brand and performance trend, brand building is really important. And our survey also showed that brand awareness is still the #1 objective for people on social. So developing skills on how to actually measure brand awareness, I think, will be a really important skill for 2020. We often stop at brand awareness metrics on social media like reach and engagement and traffic. But much like attribution, there are traditional methods on other channels that can really help you measure brand awareness and move it from a super tactical activity into more of a strategic imperative. So there's actually a book called Building Distinctive Brand Assets by Jenny Romaniuk. Oh, I probably ruined your name, Jenny. I'm sorry. But you should check that out for more information, because brand awareness it really is a worthy business goal on social media. It's not a fluffy metric. It's got concrete impact on your business. So I think we should focus on how to measure that as social marketers. Another skill, working with other teams to better understand attribution and how other channels are measuring success, like we talked about. But basically, marketing fundamentals as a whole, that's really what it boils down to. We're seeing social becoming less specialized, and I think it's going to be helpful for everyone to brush up on their broader marketing expertise. So pick up some marketing textbooks. Mark Ritson, he's got some really great resources on the importance of marketing fundamentals, even within a changing digital landscape. I think that will really help people out as the role of social marketers continues to evolve.
The really good answer. I'm actually going to supplement this. It's sort of an extension. I've just done another question. There's a lot of questions. A lot of questions are coming in around brand versus performance in many different capacities. So this is sort of an extension. When it comes to brand versus performance campaigns on social, should you have an equal amount of both? I have my thoughts, but why don't you take that first, Sarah, and I'll give you my thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of factors that go into making that decision. Your budget, your objectives, seasonality, and so on. In my research, though, I did come across some reporting from Les Binet and Peter Field. They're really the experts in this field. And they suggest a 60-40 weighting for B2C. So that's 60% brand building and 40% performance. For B2B, it's a little bit different. I think it was 54-46. If you download the report, we also go into more detail about that. There's a really good example from Adidas. They actually found that they were over-investing in their short-term performance campaigns, and they had their budget at 77% performance and only 23% brand. And they've been quite public about their efforts to correct that balance and invest more into the long-term brand building. So definitely check that out for some more perspective. But what are your thoughts, Ryan?
So for me, it's almost less about the amount in terms of how much goes towards brand versus the performance. It's more about how you use both. So we talked about at the beginning, and you mentioned this as well, Sarah, that it's really about driving down the funnel. So it is very business dependent. So think about brand as filling the top of your funnel, making sure people are aware of your brand. And then depending on how many people you have within that top of the funnel, you can then retarget them down the funnel to move towards more performance and more action-oriented outcomes. So the purpose is the brand fuels performance, and it's cyclical in nature. So remember that what you constantly need to be doing is you constantly need to be filling the top of your funnel, making sure people and new potential customers are aware of your brand and aware of your product or service, and then retargeting them with an action, getting them to go to your website, purchase, download a white paper, whatever it might be. So one kind of fuels the other, and the weighting really depends on how many people you constantly have at the top of your funnel, if that makes sense. Okay, next question here, taking a bit of a different spin. Are privacy concerns regulations going to change the way we're able to target audiences with social ads? I can take that. So the short answer is yes. The more complex answer is kind of depends on which platform. So, let's be honest here. When we talk about privacy, I think first and foremost, Facebook comes to mind, not surprisingly, with all the hot water they've been got into ever since Cambridge Analytica has opened up. But what Facebook is doing, and my expectation is that all the networks are going to have to follow suit, where they've now put restrictions in type of targeting that's available to different types of advertisers. So it's less about changing the way you advertise and more around the available targeting parameters that are open to different types of businesses. And the way, just so you know, because I'm actually seeing another question here, just so you know, the way Facebook is able to monitor that is when you have a business page, when you launch your own business page, you self-declare what type of business you are. So if you are, a recruiter, then instantly you are now in that bucket of restriction that you can't target by, I think it's age, gender, cultural affinity, that kind of thing. And then the last part of it is, what I'm curious to know about is when and how do the other networks sort of start following suit? But I think the verdict is still out to see how that's going to play out. Okay, did you have anything to add to that, Sarah? You want to continue with the questions?
No, let's keep going.
Okay, so next question. What does uniting social and search look like as tactics? I'll take that and pass it over to you as well, Sarah. So, and I'll take this because I actually recently did a whole webinar on search and social, and this is a really hot button. While I'll try to answer this reasonably quick, again, maybe we can put a link somewhere here to link to this webinar that we did on search and social, but lots of different ways of looking at this. Here's how I'll summarize it for you in general. In general, when we think about search, and of course we're thinking about Google, Google really excels in driving traffic with the intent to convert, versus if Facebook or social excels in reaching an audiences before they even know you. So think about them and how they can work together. So the most obvious way of connecting them together is start at the top of the funnel with awareness on the social side, and then retarget them with an intent to convert through search. This is the way I see lots and lots of businesses working search and social together. The more you enable yourself to retarget across search and social, the more advantage and the more streamlined your overall campaigns can be. Remember that search and social, if I think about specifically Facebook and Google, by far take the lion's share of ad spend. I think it's in the neighborhood of just shy of 65 or 70% of total ad spend. So it makes absolute sense to think about how they could potentially work together. Anything you wanted to add to that, Sarah?
No, just that along with the webinar, we do have a guide that we just wrote as well on the subject. So, you can choose to dive deeper into that topic in two different formats. Yeah,
the one thing, while it can get complicated, I highly recommend you do listen to that webinar because I provide specific tactics on actually how to retarget people off of Facebook and off of Google Ads, your Google search campaigns. Okay, what are the most important Hootsuite tools every social media manager should have? Sarah, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think tools in general, you need to make sure that they're tools that can work with one another. So with Hootsuite, for example, we have Hootsuite Ads, which you can use to manage all of your social ad campaigns in one place. And then Hootsuite Amplify, which is our employee advocacy solution, and then Hootsuite Impact, which is our ROI solution. So if you're using kind of one partner to provide you with tools to manage all these different aspects of social, it's going to be a lot easier for you, not only on a day-to-day basis, but in terms of data collection and analyzing your performance. These things all work together in complementary ways, and it also gives you one team of experts to reach out to and talk to, and they can really develop a better understanding of your organization and what you're trying to achieve. So I think those three, I think the ads, I think the employee advocacy solution, and an ROI solution. So ads, Amplify, and Impact, kind of the holy trinity.
Okay. So we're almost at time. I'm going to pick one relatively short one. I'm going to ask this one. Oh, this is actually a good one because you mentioned it quite a bit. What exactly does a private channel mean, and how are companies doing this? I guess I don't know if we really explained private channels, so maybe Sarah, you might want to just quickly explain what that means.
Yeah, super quickly, it's the difference between your Facebook newsfeed and Facebook Messenger. It's the difference between your Twitter feed and WhatsApp. So private channels are really where that one-to-one communication happens in a protected, often encrypted space versus the public forum that anyone can see simply by logging on. And our report does go into more detail about how brands are using private channels above and beyond the one example I shared with you today.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. I think you did an amazing job. And we are just at about time. So I know there's tons of more questions. We will respond to you in good time. We'll certainly do our best. And of course, you can also tweet Sarah directly at Sarah Dolly. I wanted to quickly mention a few of the ways Hootsuite can actually help you implement these trends in your day-to-day work. Sarah did touch on these a little bit, but I'll just recap for you before we close off. In terms of the tools we have to help you implement these trends. So first and foremost, as Sarah mentioned, we have an ads product called Hootsuite Ads. It's our automated ad solution that can ultimately help you improve the effectiveness of both brand and performance ad campaigns. Hootsuite Amplify, it's our scalable advocacy solution that can help take the time-consuming work out of running an employee advocacy program. And lastly, Impact. And I know a lot of people are going to get excited about this one because it's really aligned directly to our trends. It's our social analytics solution that can help you make the most easily data-driven business decisions and ultimately elevate the role of social within your organization. And since we touched on how the fact that tools aren't alone aren't enough, Sarah and I mentioned this time and time again. Note that, as you all very well know, if you're a customer of Hootsuite, and if you're not, you should be aware of this. Hootsuite's professional services team is always here to provide expert guidance on how to make the most of all the solutions available. I'll leave you one last note and a quote because I love it. Thank you, Kushal, for this quote. Remember, a calculator alone won't make you good at math. Love it. So thank you very much all for joining. To see things in action, you can also click the link below for a demo on how Hootsuite can integrate social into your organization. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll all see you guys in 2020. Thank you very much.